Welcome in, everybody. Las Vegas NASCAR Cup breakdown. Our Raceday show or race night show will go with the late night. We might have to come up with a new name. Again, going to continue this each week with probably some Saturday night shows with playback available all day Sunday. Just works out better for my schedule to be able to have that out. You guys can catch it any time instead of trying to find a time that I can do it early in the afternoon or early in the morning on Sunday. So hope everybody likes the time change a little bit. Open to some feedback on that. You can obviously do a little bit later or a little bit earlier in the week, but won't have as much data as we have after practice and qualifying. So always want that info to do these shows. Dustin says late ASCO show. Yeah, that's a nice one. I like that. So as always, if you guys have any questions throughout the show, drop them into the chat. Really excited for this race. It's nice to get off of the Daytona and Atlanta strategies that we have to use of pure place differential for the most part. A little bit of dominator last week, as we saw, but really it's nice to get to Vegas, get to a mile and a half, traditional mile and a half, and get going with the season. So really going to learn a lot about these teams, I think, this week. We've already learned a little bit in practice. So we're going to go off of that. We'll talk through. We're going to go by price tiers when we get into it. We have been going by starting position just with the place differential being so important the last 2 weeks, but going to get back to going over, dominators at the top of pricing, potentially some in the mid-range, of course, and kind of go from there. And then we'll get into building some lineups and play around with that towards the end on the sheet. So as always, if you guys have not joined us over in the Discord, be sure to check us out. I've posted all the links in the description of this video. Here's the page through WAP that you all will be able to sign up on and get access to the Discord. All sports, $25 a month. You can't beat the value that you're getting with all these sports. You can see the list there. Golf going every week. We cover PGA and Live showdowns, and also, of course, week long. The NASCAR package, all 3 series, had a really good week so far. I don't play trucks and Xfinity very heavy at all usually, just with everything else going on, life and college basketball for the most part, and some other things on the weekends makes it a little tough. But had a really good truck race last night in single entry, and same again with Xfinity. But we cover all the slates there, have highlights and cores for all 3, rankings for Cup, as we'll kind of go over the layout of that. MLB will be back very soon, NHL, NBA every day, soccer for EPL and Champions League, UFC, League of Legends. No sheet for that, but we have had a little bit of discussion throughout the week here with LPL. And LCK coming back, NFL, of course, and then college basketball and college football, but college basketball here in March, got a big lead up to the tournament. Really excited for it this year. Had a solid year so far, and we just continue to learn as much as we can about these teams heading into the tournament. So going to hop right over, going to share the screen over to the NASCAR Sheet. If you guys aren't familiar with it, just kind of a very high overview. You've got the history at Las Vegas, intermediate track type history, or track type history, in this case intermediate. Season form, which isn't very helpful this week with Daytona and Atlanta being the last 2 or the first 2 races. This week is very important. We'll go over a lot of this practice and qualifying, so we can see 5, 10, 15 lap averages, the rankings for each of those. qualifying, 1 lap average or 1 lap time for practice. And then we break down our model. So all these percentages here build up our model. So we've got a little bit weighted in 5 and 10 lap average, a little bit on 1 lap, a little bit on qualifying, just for, to have a little bit of weighting towards some dominators to help out with that. And then a little bit as well into, how well did guys do in practice versus where did they qualify? So that would help, find some of those place differential guys. Average last 2 at this track and average last 10 at this track. I've got a quarter of the model is weighted towards that. And then track type, average finish, and season average finish. So you can see that breakdown. That's going to change every week, kind of where some of those weightings are. But jumping right in, we've got this 11K driver in Kyle Larson, second and first here a year ago. Very top car in practice, starting second on the front row. Going to be very popular. We talked about it very briefly. There was some discussion about this in chat earlier, but very popular. One of the best, or probably the best in the series here at Vegas. Won in 21 as well, second in 22 in the fall or in the spring. The 22 fall race was the one that he was wrecked by Bubba, and they got into it in the infield, but wrecked out of that one. But otherwise, 4 top 2s in his last 5 finished races here at Vegas. Hard to go away from that. Writes out very well. Him and William Byron are the class of the field from practice. They've been the class of the field here recently, leading tons of laps. Honestly, I think I'm debating on just saying min one of these if I'm running an optimizer or even hand building. Running at least one of these guys in every lineup that I make. I see a lot of scenarios working out where it's either Larson gets past Logano, because Logano, if we dig into his practice a little bit, he was not the top car by any means. 14th in 5-lap average, 11th in 10. He looks like a fade for me. Didn't have the speed that he showed in qualifying that he in practice on longer runs and things. So looking like a fade for me on Logano. The rest of this upper range, I do have some interest. But Larson and Byron, I see, Larson getting by Logano early and getting out to the lead is as the most likely scenario. But I don't think it's out of the question that William Byron on a long run could be faster than Kyle Larson. So I think you could see that play out. We saw a lot last year, these guys just being the class of field and swapping the lead throughout. So I think you can play both as well, even at these price tags. Those are my top 2 favorites. Denny Hamlin's going to be very popular as well, just because of the starting position. He was not good in practice. I do like Toyota this week overall. I think I'm going to be a little heavier on Larson and Byron here at the top as dominators, and maybe be a little underweight on the Denny Hamlin chalk at 10-7, starting 28th, and just hope it's one of those, all right, Hamlin finishes 7th, runs decent, no dominator points, and Larson and Byron just smash the dominator points, and you can't play all 3. So leaning towards being heavy on Larson and Byron, a little underweight on Hamlin. Blaney's the other guy. I think he's an interesting tournament play. Starting 15th, has a little bit of place differential built in there. Wasn't great in practice, a little bit better on the long run than the short run. So that's encouraging that he could maybe be a later race dominator if you play a Larson or Byron and then play a Ryan Blaney. I think he'll stay in my player pool for sure. Dropping on down, again, Logano probably going to be a fade for me. Going to talk about one of the comments that we had in chat here. Andrew, I think this is a little bit before the show started, but said, might sound stupid, but going to be under on Larson. Don't think he can beat 40,000 other lineups with him. I definitely get that. I mean, that's not as much as I do, and everybody likes Larson. Game theory is a thing, and NASCAR's variant. Kyle Larson, he's had a lot of bad luck over the last year. As much as he's ran so well, he has ran into some bad luck. And who knows? I mean, maybe it is Byron, but I do think you go well over on one of those guys, because I see one of them being the class of this field. And these are much more, if you're new to NASCAR this year, Vegas is a much more predictive race than an Atlanta and a Daytona. You're going to have dominators out front. You're going to see speed over a longer run, more than likely, than what we saw at Daytona or Atlanta, where we had a lot of cautions. We had some craziness towards the end. You're going to see speed win out in a lot of these races throughout the year on mile and a halves. So you're going to want to, be heavy on the faster cars. I mean, it's just you don't. In a lot of cases, like when you're comparing a Logano and a Larson, that's kind of what I'm talking about here is Logano just didn't show the speed. He over qualified for his speed. Maybe we'd have a different discussion if he was starting 20th, but starting off the pole, I think there's just too much downside. In these races, Larson and Byron, I expect them to be run really well and at least dominate a portion of this race. Don't have to play both of them. Let me get that straight. I think you can definitely play one and then drop down into this 9K range or something like that, because there's some really good cars in this range as well. You got Chase Elliott down to Ross Chastain. Elliott was decent in practice. I expect him to get a win earlier in the year. I think he's got a lot to prove coming off of last year. He was around 5th or 6th best car in practice overall in the mid-run on the 5 and the 10 lap average. So starting 11th, I think he's a fine play, that maybe you pair one of those other Hendrick cars with him. Kyle Busch was really good in practice, top 5 car, and now he's starting 21st. I think I prefer him to a Denny Hamlin. If we're talking about these 9K and above place differential drivers, I prefer Kyle Busch. Christopher Bell and Martin Truex both starting top 10. Bell was top 10 in practice. Truex was just looked a little bit off. I think I'm probably not going to end up with both of these guys, but if you look back to history here, Bell was second, chasing home Kyle Larson last fall. I mean, that was a pretty close finish within a car length or something. So I think Bell has a good day. He was 5th here in the spring last year too. Good track for him overall. Martin Truex has been a top 10 car here forever, it seems like, all the way back to the fall of 2020. You have to go to the spring of 2020 to find his last non-top 10 at Vegas. And he actually won in the fall of 19. Of course, different car type at back then. But I think both are interesting. If you're going to go heavier on a Toyota type build, maybe you play a Kyle Larson and drop down to one of those guys as a secondary dominator. I think you go there. When you're thinking about ownership in this range, I think it's, of course, going to be lower than Larson and Byron. I think Bell and Truex are both interesting pivots, because I don't think both of those guys are going to get a lot of ownership. If you're heavier on the manufacturer or JGR, I think that makes some sense to go there. Ross Chastain, I think he'll be pretty popular 9,100. He'll definitely be more popular than the group that I just mentioned above. The rest of the 9K range, he'll probably be the top owned guy. I think he's definitely one of the top plays. I mean, second and third here back in 2022 in those races. He was 12th and 5th last year. Starting 20th just gives you that place differential. He was around a 10th place car, I would say, in practice on the 5-lap average. The 10 looks a little wonky, so I'm not going to pay attention to that 10-lap average being 22nd when he was 11th and 5. And the best overall lap in practice was his. So I think he's going to be popular, but I think he's definitely in play. Tyler Reddick starts out the next range. He was very, very good in the practice, especially on the long run, improved from 7th on the 5-lap to 3rd in the 10 and the 15, and he starts 18th. I think he's my favorite place differential driver in the field. His teammate Bubba Wallace, very good as well in practice, but he qualified 5th. I think he's a secondary dominator look. If you're going to pair, he could be one of your later race dominators. I don't think he gets out front ahead of these Hendrick cars early in the race, but I think he could hang around there. He's been very good at Vegas and Kansas, which is a comp, probably the top comp to this track. And I think he's an interesting tournament play at pretty low ownership. I mean, he might be for sure half the ownership of Reddick just because of the starting position. Maybe a third, honestly, when all's said and done. So I think that Bubba is definitely an interesting tournament look here. At 8,700 in this mid-range, that could be a dominator later in the race. He was kind of the same as Reddick, 12th on the 5-lap, but 8th and then 4th over the longer run. So I think, maybe we see like a Larson lead the first 40 laps, and then Bubba Wallace hangs around and gets out front here, which I think is very doable. He was 4th here last spring, 13th in the fall. So I think both of those are interesting plays, just kind of different types of plays. So you got to, keep that in mind when you're building teams. Keselowski, Buescher, and Bowman round out the 8K range. When we're looking at practice times, none really ran a 10-lap. Keselowski was slow in practice, and he's starting 25th. Buescher was fine though, so you could look at that two ways. I mean, Buescher, his teammate, was around a 10th to 15th place car in practice, which takes me off Buescher. But if you think about it, that Keselowski maybe learns a little bit from whatever Buescher had to be around that 10th to 15th place car. He works on it throughout the race. Maybe Keselowski at 8,500 can get around a 10th place finish at the 25th starting point, which is very interesting. However, Alex Bowman starting 23rd as the 4th Hendrick car, I think is my second favorite option probably in this range behind Reddick. Definitely for place differential. At 8,100 fair price, 10th, kind of right around a 10th place car. And if Hendrick overall has got something, I think Alex Bowman could definitely work his way into the top 10. It probably has upside for a top 5 here. So I think he's definitely in play. Moving on, we'll do the 7K and then we'll kind of lump the rest together. Suarez down to Cindric. Kind of a tough range here. My favorite guy in this group actually would have been Ty Gibbs, but he's starting 8th. So similar to Bubba, but a lot more risk. I expect a lot of good things out of Ty Gibbs this year. I drafted him maybe a little early, maybe not a little early in our best ball that we did as a group. We had 8 guys in there, and picked him what I thought might have been a round early, but didn't think he would get back to me. And I think he was going to actually get picked 1 or 2 after me. So I expect a lot of good things from him this year. he was fast. 1 lap speed was fast, but he was a little bit slow in the 5 and the 10 lap average, and then goes out and qualifies 8th. So if you're just looking at the data, it looks to me like he's got a quick short run car, and the long run might need a little bit of work. So starting 8th makes that tough to get there. Suarez, the winner last week, 16th. I like his teammate Chastain, and he's ran around 10th to 15th in this at Las Vegas over the last couple years. So there might be a little bit of meat on that bone, but 7,800's a little high for me. So none of this range I'm really intrigued by. Cindric starting 3rd, was slow in practice. Will be off of him. McDowell starting 12th. Kind of similar to Ty Gibbs, was quick in the 1 lap, but had a very bad 5-lap average. Jones was just slow overall. Maybe that's something they can kind of figure out. He's starting 22nd. Might need to dig into that one a little bit more, because they are in the Toyota camp now. So if you're heavier on Toyota, don't forget that Eric Jones is in one. But he was slow overall in practice. I don't know if there was more to that story, or if they just wanted to work on some things and that maybe they got a little bit figured out here. But 22nd, let's see this range as far as. I don't think it's going to be popular at all overall. So if you want to take some stabs in this range, I think a lot are going to do what I was talking about: jam in a Kyle Larson, a William Byron, and then drop down into the cheap range. I think it's better strategy to get as many up front to hit those 2 dominators instead of chasing a place differential. So I think what you're talking about is take a lot of shots on these dominators instead of playing guys like a Hamlin, a Kyle Busch, that are the place differential drivers in the upper range. I think that's definitely the strategy I'm looking at. Kyle Busch, I think, would be my favorite place differential driver up top. But I think you got to have these dominators, and that might be something that everybody knows it later in the year. But after we've had 2 place differential tracks, maybe it gets a little bit lost in the shuffle that you need 2 dominators at this track, maybe even 3. If you're playing, somebody in this mid-range that you think can lead, you could play up to 3 dominators, and I wouldn't be opposed to it. So I think that is a solid strategy. It's probably what I'm looking at doing is prioritizing getting dominators. Maybe you mix and match some of these, like maybe you mix and match like a Larson, a Byron, Bubba Wallace, like I said, some of these guys that you just mix around. You had to have Smith and JHN. I had Chandler, no JHN today for me. That was really the missing spot. Ended up, let's see, where did I end up? I think I was 25th in the single entry I was in. Allgaier was just too good to pass up that place differential for him, starting pretty much dead last. But Chandler and Brandon Jones are the other 2. So really, I had Chandler as the main dominator. If you want to kind of think about this roster construction from the Xfinity side, I didn't really do the same strategy that I'm talking about doing for tomorrow in Xfinity. I had Chandler as the main dominator starting 2nd. Thought he was really good here, and could be the dominator, which he did. I mean, he led 74. But Allgaier is kind of the wrench, and I don't think I would classify him the same as like it's similar to a Denny Hamlin, but I think there's so many you can look at it a couple ways. You could think that he is the same uh, as Allgaier from today, but I think starting even in the 20s, he's got a lot of place differential upside, but it's not as much as Allgaier had today. And Allgaier overall had a decent day. Even got up and led a few laps, but finishing 10th, very solid from a fantasy perspective. Won't kill you, but might not have won it for you. Let's see. Yeah, the winner had those three: Allgaier, Chandler, JHN. I think I'm in Cup. I'm going to take a little bit slightly different approach and go with the heavier dominators, like you mentioned in the question before, up top with mixing and matching those guys, as opposed to playing one dominator of this top range and jamming place differential. We'll play with builds here in a second, and maybe we can land on something that's a little interesting. Maybe we can get three of these guys up here, maybe if you go like a Larson, Kyle Busch, Reddick, or Bubba or something, you get multiple dominators, but you still get one of the place differential, something like that. But anyway, the 7K range I think is going to be a little underowned. No drivers that I really like, though. So if you want to take some stabs, you can, but nothing that I'm going to be very heavy on. 6K and below, or 6,800 and below. Kind of a tough range as always. We don't know a lot about these teams on these tracks right now. I think you're going to have to speculate a little bit on this. Of course, we've got the chalk of Ryan Preece, who will start 36th. Noah Gregson, his teammate's going to start 30th. That's where the chalk's going to congregate in this range. And I think it's warranted. But I also don't think that either one of these guys have crazy speed. I think both are probably, I don't know. It looks like Gregson had a lot of speed in practice, but he didn't run a ton of laps, at least consecutively. So I think that pushes a little more. If people are looking at that practice data, I think it pushes a lot of people on to Gregson. And I'm not saying he's a bad play, but I don't think he's going to be like one of those value plays at 6,200 that I just go massively overweight on and push it up to 40, 50%. I don't think it's anything like that for me. Preece starting 36, that's going to be tough. As far as history here, I mean, he's 26th and 23rd last year in this car. Barry's sandwiched between those, starting 26th. He was decent in practice, I'll say. Barry was 21st in 5-lap, 15th, and then 11th in the 10 and 15 lap averages. Of course, a lot of people didn't run the 15, so I think there's some meat for place differential for Barry. JHN at 6,700. This pricing is quite interesting to me. That John Hunter is 67, and a lot of these Stewart Haas cars are low sixes, but he was not good in practice. Again, it's kind of similar to his teammate Eric Jones. If you're going to take a shot on the Toyota camp, that they figure something out either into the race or they've already figured it out a little bit, or maybe they were just set up for longer runs and we didn't see it fully in practice. But that's kind of the argument for John Hunter. Austin Dillon was good here in 21 and 22. Not so great last year. And he was, decent in practice. I think he could stay in your player pool, but nothing to really write home about. Todd Gilliland has had a great start to the year. Now he's starting 31st. I think he's definitely in play, but he did not have any speed in practice. McDowell, his teammate, was kind of similar, was not fast in practice. I think a lot of these Fords are missing or missed on a lot in practice at least. Hocevar, who else? LaJoy in this range, Briscoe. Briscoe and LaJoy both had very solid practices. Briscoe finished that up qualifying 6th. LaJoy is a little farther back, mid-pack at 17th. He kind of ran in that range over the last 2 years. He has here 15th to 24th. His last 4 finishes. Could play one of those. Zane Smith in the 71. He was quick in practice. He was one that really stood out to me. And that's something I'm surprised about with Zane in this car. That he had that much speed, but he is starting 24th. He's cheap. I think he's in play. I don't think people are going to fully believe that practice data. So you could definitely get something there of maybe a slightly lower ownership on him. Overall, besides the 2 of Gregson and Priest, I think ownership's going to be spread out. And if you can find that driver or 2 down here that gets up into that, all these guys are starting towards the back for the most part, besides Stenhouse, Briscoe, Hocevar. Hocevar would be a fade. Briscoe likely will be a fade for me, and Stenhouse will likely be a fade for me. But out of this other group, if you can find that driver of this group that can get up into that, 15th to 20th range, I think that's what you're looking for here. You're not looking for, like at Daytona, Atlanta, we're looking at massive place differential guys back here that can finish top 5 potentially, definitely top 10. Here, I don't think we're looking for that. I mean, like I said, speed's going to win out. We are not looking for chaos to happen necessarily in this race. So you're going to need good cars up there to finish. And guys like Gregson, Barry, Priest, Gilliland, even Zane Smith, if the practice data is true, all have that upside to get in the top 20. If you nail the rest of your build, and let's go ahead and hop right into that right now. Playing around with some builds. If you play 1 or 2 of these guys down here and they can get in that top 20 for you, you nail the dominators, which is going to be the most important thing for tomorrow, where maybe you get a ton of points between 2 or 3 dominators. These guys get in the top 20, and that's enough for you because it allows you to get up into those Byron and Larson range there. Before we hop into building, I'm going to show you, we've had this for a few years on the sheet now, but we have one for DraftKings and FanDuel, the Fantasy Matrix. This is going to show you a lot of different things, and I might play around with plugging in some laps led and fastest laps here or there later on. But this is really, if you guys want to play around with this, you can make a copy of the sheet and run a couple different scenarios. But ultimately, what we wanted to get out of this is a perfect example of that we can compare a Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin, because on the surface, this is very hard to compare, Kyle Larson starting 2nd to Denny Hamlin starting 28th. We know we need Larson to dominate a portion of this race, but how much does he need to dominate if Denny Hamlin starting 28th gets a 8th place finish? How much does he need to dominate this race to outperform him? Same thing with William Byron against Denny Hamlin, but it really allows us to do that. And if you're looking in the cheaper range, it allows us to easily see, and I'm going to do an example of this here in a second, but it allows us to see like a Corey LaJoy versus Noah Gregson. Starting at 13 places different. All right, if LaJoy, we think he, his upside is probably let's just say a 15th. We think he finishes around 15th. Without any laps led or fastest laps, that gives LaJoy 30. So for Gregson to tie his 30, he would have to finish 21st. So any top 20 from Noah Gregson is going to be the top 15 from Corey LaJoy. And this is just an easy visual when you're building out teams to say, all right, do I want more exposure to this guy or this? And, you can compare and say, well, ownership, let's just say ownership was similar on those two. It's not going to be. Gregson will probably be double, if not more, the ownership. But if you thought, well, let me flip that around. If Gregson is 3 times as much owned, and you thought that Corey LaJoie had upside for maybe pushing a 10th, but probably let's say you think he could get up to 12. Well, there's where you can make a stand where a 36 from Corey LaJoie, Gregson's going to have to get 18th, and maybe you don't think he's got a top 20 car to do that. There's where you can kind of easily compare the outcomes. So let's just do the example of Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin here and see what we can do. So let's say Kyle Larson has, let's just say he leads 80 laps tomorrow. Gets out front, that's a lot of laps led. Let's just say he then gets, 45 fastest laps, and he's probably going to get more. If he leads 80, he's probably going to be, they're not going to be exactly the same, but let's just say that's where we stand. And now we can compare, again, this is just kind of an example, but he gets 40 Dominator points added to his floor. Denny Hamlin, let's just say Larson does that and then finishes third in the race. That's 80 DraftKings points. Denny Hamlin gets, let's just say he gets 15 fastest laps, harder to do so coming through the field. Doesn't get that many, doesn't lead any laps. Let's just say he gets out front, leads 8 laps tomorrow. He has to win the race to beat a Kyle Larson finishing third in that scenario. So if you say Larson leads 80 laps, there's where you can easily see that, yes, Hamlin's safety is there, because if he doesn't do any of that, if you take out all these laps led and fastest laps and just look at it, a Kyle Larson win is the equivalent of a Denny Hamlin 12th, just, right around there, for example. So, but when you add in those fastest laps like we can do here, it makes you see how important these dominators are. And there's enough laps to go around that you really need to get there and nail the right ones. So going to play around with some bills and then get out of here. Let's see. I will have my cores up on this page. Usually, or have been doing 2. I'm probably going to stick to that for this week. And then I'll have my top targets either later tonight or in the morning as well. And if I end up doing 20 max, I'll have all my exposures there as well, which I do most every week. So we'll get those up. So just going to play around with the core. So let's play all right, we just jammed the William Byron and Kyle Larson. We think those are the 2 best cars. Let's see what we can do from that point. We don't have a lot of salary left over. We can probably push that enough to get another 8K driver. 71.25 for the last 4 spots on average. So you're going to have to play 2 down here. Maybe you don't play a Gregson and a Priest together. Maybe that's your leverage, or maybe you play a Josh Berry instead of those guys, because I think Berry will be the lowest on of those 3. Maybe he's the one that you play. But let's just say we play, in this case, we're going to pick one of those 3, and then maybe we play a Zane Smith too. So if we play, let's just say we play a Gregson and Zane Smith here. That gets us back up to 8,300 for 2 spots. And we have a lot we can do here. So I mentioned I like Alex Bowman a lot. If you play him in that build, you're going to be left at 85. So you're at the Keselowski Buescher range. Don't love that. Otherwise, though, it's kind of tough, because you're going to have to play one of these 7K drivers to get up to a Tyler Reddick. And I don't mind having that stack of the Bowman, Larson, and Byron. Let me see what the price. It's $200 difference to Gregson and Priest. So there's an example you could do. So instead of Gregson, and again, I'm just playing around with these here. But you jam in Larson and Byron. You play the chalky value piece in Priest, a less chalky value piece in Zane Smith. Then you get back up into this 8K range. You can play an Alex Bowman, who I really like, complete 3 Hendrick cars. And then you throw in a Bubba Wallace, who, all right, he's going to need to lead laps too. So you're playing a 3 dominator build where all 3 of these guys are going to need to lead at some point, and maybe you're playing that they finish top 5. But that's an interesting build that you can go to. So let's now instead say we keep Kyle Larson, but instead for our second dominator, we don't go with William Byron. We drop down and we try to do this Reddick. We try to make Reddick work here. And he could definitely lead later in this race too. But maybe we're heavy on Toyota again, and we want to go Kyle Larson and then the 2 teammates of Reddick and Bubba Wallace. Then for 3 spots, we're back down into that same range. We got 7,100 average, and we pick our favorites down here. We go a Noah Gregson this time. Gets us back to 7,600 for 2 spots. And then maybe we go the Alex Bowman route, and we then can fill that in with somebody in that high 6, low 7 range. You could also, let's just see. So kind of the lowest I would go. I'm probably not playing anybody. Let's see. I don't think I will play Harrison Burton. As of now, I'm leaning Zane Smith would be my lowest that I would go. And this is not something that I want to be playing around with a 20 max, and just because of the price tag, I end up with 50% Zane Smith. But if in this build you played that 2 cheaper options, you can get all the way back up to 9,500. That's what I was just trying to see. What's the farthest I can get back up to? And you got a lot of options in that range. I mean, you got Christopher Bell, Martin Truex could be your 3rd dominator in this build, or you can play another place differential driver in Ross Chastain. So I think that's very interesting. This is, these builds are where I want to live tomorrow. I want to have as many of these fast cars as I can go, and I'm probably going to have to play 2 cheap guys to get there. And just so be it. I hope, mix and match 2 of these cheap ones down here, and just hope that I can get the top 20s out of 2 of these guys. And if I can get 15th and 18th out of 2 different spots down here, I nail 2 or 3 dominators, and then 1 good place differential driver like a Tyler Reddick, or in this case, potentially 2 place differential drivers in Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain, who can finish top 10. I think that's where I want to live, and just hope that I can nail that, the 2 cheap ones down low. I'll play around with one more that maybe fades Larson. Like I said, I'm leaning towards putting the rule in of William Byron, at least one of William Byron or Kyle Larson, just because of the speed. But let's say in this one we go a little different, continue the Hendrick stacks, but we go instead this time William Byron and Chase Elliott. And now we've got 74-25. We could, still, of course, play Bowman. But we go down here and we play let's say we play Ryan Preece and Josh Berry. 8,800 now left. A lot we can do here. Alex Bowman would complete the three Hendricks. We got 2 Dominators already in Chase Elliott, William Byron, but now we're at the 9,500 range again, exactly where we were, where we can go Christopher Bell, Truex, Chastain. If you in this build, if you're mixing and matching and you got rid of one of Barry or Priest and dropped it back down to that Zane Smith, you're going to be able to play like a Kyle Busch if you wanted to get up to him. So a lot you can do by playing 2 of these cheaper guys. I will have all my ranks up. I will definitely tier it off to where it's under 7K is what I'm ranking, so that you can see where I end up with these cheap guys, and because a lot of these builds are landing on 2 of them. As of now, I'm leaning towards maybe taking the leverage and going to Josh Berry and Noah Gregson a little bit more than Ryan Preece of those 3. And I think those 3 will be some of the more popular ones. Zane Smith, I think, is my favorite cheap option. I might play around with Daniel Hemrick. I want to dig in a little bit more. I don't know. I think he is in, let's see here, same car that Haley was in last year, if I'm not mistaken. And Haley was 8th in the spring and 22nd in the fall. Pretty good in 22 as well in the next gen car here. So maybe that's the lowest that I would actually end up going is Daniel Hemrick. Hemrick was in practice, his 5 lap was way off. He was decent for where he's starting at 34th. I mean, he's got more upside and more floor than a Zane Smith for sure. So I do think I'm going to have some Daniel Hemrick because I am playing so many 2 punt builds, we'll call it. Stenhouse, I don't know. I mean, he was good in practice. Around a 15th, 10th place car. This is going to be a good exercise here. So this is probably something I'm overlooking, to be honest. So let's go over to the matrix one more time, and then we'll get out of here. But if we compare Ricky Stenhouse and let's just say a Noah Gregson in this range, well, Gregson starting 30th, Stenhouse 13th. So if we think Stenhouse is a 10th to 15th place car, let's say he finishes right around where he starts. Let's say he gets that 12th place finish. 12th place for, and we're going to, for both of these, I don't see them, of course, as dominators. So we're just going to look without any laps led or fastest laps. They'll probably even out themselves for fastest laps throughout the race if they have 2 or 3. But Ricky Stenhouse, a 12th place finish is 32. For Gregson to beat a 32, he has to finish 20th. Do I think Noah Gregson finishing top 20 is more likely than Ricky Stenhouse finishing 12th? Yes. But I think, I think it's a little more in play if he can be that 10th to 15th place car and have that speed, stay out of trouble throughout the race. I don't hate that as leverage, actually, because, Gregson's probably going to be, 25% owned at least, 25, 30 maybe. Depends on how many people jam in Priest, just starting 6 spots farther back. But Stenhouse, just because of the starting position, you got to think he's 5% on probably 5. So maybe 1/5 or 1/4, the ownership potentially of a Noah Gregson. So if you think that he can be that 10th to 15th place car, I think there is some potential for him to be one of these options in this range. So yes, I think he actually is in play. Probably a little more than I was talking about him throughout the show. Any other questions? I will be in the chat tomorrow for sure, on and off. I'll I'm going to do my best to get my rankings and cores up tonight before bed. Again, be sure to check us out over at WAP. I have all the links in the description of this video. It will get you access to our Discord. Our Discord is where we post all of our sheets. Maybe I can give you a little bit of, let's see here. We'll look at it here. So again, if you weren't here early in the show, we're going to post all these sheets. We do post all these sheets to our Discord every day. NBA, NHL, MLB will be every day. NASCAR for all 3 series. Golf for Live and PGA, we have sheets. Soccer for Champions League and Premier League. UFC every week we have coverage there for a sheet. NFL, of course, when it's back. League of Legends, no sheet, but some coverage in the chat right now. College sports, we've got college basketball ramping up every single day. I've got you covered in there with cores. Projections are in there as well for that, as we, only 3 weeks away from the tournament. So really excited for that. Finally got one of those tickets into the King of the Bracket for this year. I've been trying probably the last 2 years. Last year, very heavily. The year before, not so much. But this year, was happy to get one a little early. So excited for that. So we're going to have you covered through conference tournaments, NCAA tournaments. Be sure to check us out. There's a free trial on all of these. At least the all sports package. If you want to do the monthly package for $25 a month for all sports that we cover, you're going to get cores for all the sports, sheets for all the sports, but you get a 2-day free trial. So be sure to try that out. You get 7 days free with the yearly package of $225. But if you wanted to do, Monday and Sunday and Monday, check us out. You can get into I have a link as well for the free trial, but you're not going to get any of the access to the sheets except for the free channels, which is tennis. We don't charge for tennis right now because it's a little bit sporadic. I think I had sheets for 2 or 3 of the slates this week. But we do have some coverage for that cores when I have the sheets. Check us out. Again, I'll have all the stuff up for NASCAR Cup Series tonight, rankings and cores. Look forward to seeing you guys in the Discord. Hit us up with questions. You can do it in the main chat or DM, whatever works for you. Look forward to seeing you in there. Good luck on Sunday with all of your DFS contests, but especially the Cup Series. Look forward to seeing you guys back next week.